It was a sweltering evening in the heart of Lagos. The sun had long set, but the city's pulse hadn't slowed. Cars honked in the distance, and the hum of the city mixed with the sound of children playing in the streets. However, inside Queen's Secondary School, the air was thick with tension. It was after hours, and most students had gone home, but a small group remained behind for detention. Among them was Adanna, a quiet, soft-spoken girl who always kept to herself. Adanna had become the target of bullying in school. She didn't wear the latest clothes or have the newest gadgets like the other girls. Her family was poor, and it showed in the way her shoes were worn, the way her uniform was always a little too big or too small. She wasn't pretty, according to the popular girls, and her introverted nature made her the perfect target for their cruel games. The ringleader of the group was Amaka, a tall, beautiful girl who everyone admired. Amaka's father was wealthy, and she never let anyone forget it. She and her friends, Chinyere and Ngozi, had made it their mission to make Adanna's life miserable. Adanna sat in the back corner of the classroom, staring at the worn-out textbooks on her desk. She had been caught lingering in the library too late, hoping to avoid the bullying after school, but her strategy had backfired. Now she was stuck in detention with the very people she wanted to avoid. Amaka, sitting 2 rows ahead, turned around and whispered loudly to her friends, "Look at her, sitting there like she's invisible. Maybe if she wishes hard enough, she'll disappear." Chinyere and Ngozi snickered. They had been relentless all week, hiding Adanna's books, pushing her in the hallways, and even spreading nasty rumors about her. Adanna kept her head down, pretending not to hear. But inside, she was boiling with anger, fear, and something else she couldn't quite place. As the teacher, Mr. Olumide, droned on about the importance of discipline, the power flickered. The lights dimmed, casting eerie shadows across the room. He paused and looked around, his face briefly illuminated by the glow of his phone screen. "Must be a power surge," he muttered before continuing his lecture. But Adanna felt something different in the air. It wasn't just the power flickering. It was the heavy, suffocating feeling that had followed her since the beginning of the school year. Ever since the bullying began, she had felt a presence around her, something dark and cold, lurking just out of sight. The room grew quieter as the temperature dropped suddenly. Even Amaka, usually so bold, glanced around nervously. "What's going on?" she whispered to Ngozi. Chinyere shrugged, but her eyes darted toward the windows, where the streetlights outside flickered eerily. The air felt thick, like a storm was about to break, yet there were no clouds in the sky. Mr. Olumide, sensing the unease, decided to cut the tension short. "All right, you're all dismissed. Go straight home. No loitering." The students grabbed their bags and hurried toward the door. Adanna was the last to leave, her steps slow and heavy. But as she approached the doorway, she felt a cold breeze sweep through the room even though the windows were closed. She stopped, her breath catching in her throat. Behind her, a shadow shifted. It wasn't just the flickering lights. This shadow was darker, deeper, and it seemed to have substance. It moved, creeping along the walls like a living thing. Amaka, still lingering near the door with Chinyere and Ngozi, noticed Adanna had stopped. "What's wrong? Scared of your own shadow?" Amaka sneered. But before Adanna could reply, the shadow behind her twisted and took form. It wasn't just a shadow, it was something else. A figure, tall and gaunt, with hollow eyes and a mouth that seemed to stretch too wide. Its limbs were unnaturally long, and it moved with a fluid, ghostly grace. The room grew impossibly cold. Amaka, Chinyere, and Ngozi froze, their sneers vanishing as terror settled into their bones. "What is that?" Ngozi whimpered. Adanna turned slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. She saw it too. The creature, whatever it was, loomed behind her, but its hollow eyes weren't fixed on her. They were focused on the bullies. Amaka stumbled backward, her bravado crumbling. This isn't funny, Adanna, she shouted, her voice shaking. What did you do? Adanna didn't answer. She had no idea what was happening, but deep down, a part of her wasn't afraid. It was as if this shadow, this creature, had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for her tormentors to be alone and vulnerable. The shadow moved swiftly, gliding across the room like a snake. It circled Amaka first, its long fingers brushing her arm. She screamed, but no sound came out. Her voice was trapped in her throat, and her body was paralyzed with fear. The creature's mouth opened wider, and a deep, guttural sound filled the room. It was neither a laugh nor a growl, but something in between, something ancient and full of malice. The lights flickered violently, casting distorted reflections of the shadow creature on every surface. Chinyere and Ngozi clutched each other, backing away toward the door, but they couldn't escape. The creature moved faster than any of them could react. It reached for them, its dark fingers grazing their skin. The moment it touched them, they collapsed to the floor, their faces pale, their eyes wide with terror. Adanna watched, her heart racing, unsure if she should feel relieved or terrified. The shadow wasn't coming for her. It seemed to be protecting her, avenging her. Amaka, still on her feet, trembled as the shadow loomed over her. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean it. Please, Adanna, make it stop." But Adanna wasn't in control. The shadow was its own entity, driven by the cruelty it had witnessed. It bent low, its face inches from Amaka's. For a moment, everything was still. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the shadow dissolved into the floor, vanishing as if it had never been there. The light stabilized, and the oppressive cold lifted, but the damage was done. Amaka, Chinyere, and Ngozi were left trembling on the floor, their eyes wide with fear. They had been touched by something far more terrifying than anything they had ever imagined. Adanna, standing at the doorway, took one last look at them before stepping out into the night. She didn't know what the shadow was or why it had appeared, but one thing was clear: the bullying would stop. From that day on, the girls never spoke of what happened in the classroom. They avoided Adanna, their eyes filled with fear whenever she passed by. The school seemed different after that night, as if the walls themselves held a secret. Whispers spread among the students, rumors of a dark presence that lingered in the hallways, protecting the weak and punishing the cruel. And Adanna? She never saw the shadow again, but she knew it was always there, watching, waiting, ready to strike if the darkness of cruelty ever rose again.